Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the East Riding of Yorkshire series. Together with the unparished city of Hull, it forms the county of the same name. There's 172 parishes here. Which one are we in today? Okay, today in the East Riding of Yorkshire, I've come just to the south of Hutton Cranswick, which is the last one you saw in this series. This is a very, very small village. It's a linear village as well, but it does have some interesting bits and bobs, including a priory, which I'm hoping to get close to. I'm not sure if I can from the public footpath that sort of runs close to it. This is Wattun. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Today we're in Watten, a village and civil parish in the East Riding of Yorkshire, situated on the A164 road about 6 miles north of Beverley and 6 miles south of Driffield. It's mainly one long street which runs from east to west. At the far eastern end, it adjoins the A164 and that's where you can find the parish notice board. With that out of the way early, let's go and see this village. Our first landmark of note is just across the road and it's the old red phone box which has a defib machine. The origin of the word waten is uncertain, but suggestions include the Old English term wad or woad and tun, meaning small farming settlement. I choose to believe, though, it's more to do with water. Watten could be a modern version of the word waden, which means ford, or waétan, meaning watery. A little later, you'll see why I choose to believe that when we go down this footpath, which you can see here to the left, because that will take us to a rather lovely water feature. Watton's main pieces of history are as follows. Firstly, there was a Frankish saint who lived in the 6th century, named Monegunda of Wattun. In the 13th century, William de Malton lived here too. He was a master mason who built Beverley Minster, and he's also buried here. Watten is also the setting for a 12th century miracle story called de Sanctimoniali de Wattun, which also goes by the name A Certain Wonderful Miracle. It's set in the Gilbertine nunnery of Watten and tells the story of the nun of Watten. A little later around our route, we'll encounter Watton Priory, where I'll attempt to tell you the story. I hope I do it justice. I'm much better at telling you about things like this water pump, which would have been one of Watton's water sources in times past. And speaking of water, here at the other end of Watton's main street is a wastewater treatment works, which is up a private road, but I'm sure you all know what these look like by now. So I've only taken 12 shots up to now, and I'm at the end of the village. That's Main Street, effectively, from one end to the other. But we're not done. I need to walk back the other way, and I need to take a footpath which will take me down to where the church is located on the opposite side of the A164, and that's also where the priory is. Let's see if we can find it. So to that footpath which takes us south from Main Street and down towards a beck. Quite a wide beck, in fact, and one that would almost pass for being a river. This footpath effectively runs through some farmland and between two fields which have horses in them. The locals must have known I was coming too, because they sent a welcome party. So this footpath runs straight through somebody's front yard. This is going to be interesting. There's a little dog as well who's come to greet me. There he is. Don't know whether you can see him. This is the thing with public rights of way. You never know where they're going to go. Hello, mate. Hi.
She's very timid. Got a noisy back, but she's very timid.
Yeah, I can see, yeah. Right, wait, I'm following the footpath. Where do I go? This way?
Well,
You're doing well, sorry.
she's following the footpath here.
Oh, thanks. Where are you going?
Where do you want to go?
Towards the main road, because
Oh,
I
well,
believe
you
it.
go
I believe
that
it
way
turns there, doesn't it? Yeah,
it does,
that's
yeah.
right. Yeah, thank
I didn't
you.
know whether you wanted to go up to the wood or not.
No, I'm headed towards where the church is.
Oh, right.
Thank you.
Yeah, just go along back across the road and see where that edge is. Cross the road there, then you're back on the old road.
I can't fault the guy's directions. They were spot on. The footpath turns both ways at that house. As they rightly said, turning right takes you to a wood, but we're following this beck. This is Watton Beck, which flows from west to east, eventually draining into the River Hull at Wilfholme, a small hamlet over the parish boundary and into Beswick. We'll meet the beck again shortly. First we have to cross the A164, which, believe it or not, has the highest volume of traffic in the East Riding, with some sections carrying over 30,000 vehicles per day. The area Watton occupies is generally a low-lying flat area on the western side of the Hull Valley. As such, there's a wetland area to the east, known as Top Hill Low Nature Reserve. The original plan here was to drive down to that after the main walk, but as you've just seen from those signs, it was closed. Top Hill Low is an active Yorkshire water treatment works built in 1959. It formally opened as a nature reserve in 1993 and it features 2 reservoirs. We can't see any of that though, so here's Watton Beck again for you as we near the church. So this area is kind of detached from the main Watton village. It's out to the east. It's just really a clump of houses, which you can see here, and then there's the church, which is just out of shot to the left, and the priory is right next door. Now I won't be able to walk up to the priory because it's not a public footpath, it's definitely a private road. I've checked this, but I might be able to get a few shots of it from the churchyard, so hopefully that's what I'm going to do right now. This is pretty much the eastern extent of Watton village. Beyond this there's Watton Priory, and then not much else really between it and Top Hill Low. There is a railway line though. So this is the Church of St Mary, which was designated a Grade 1 listed building in September 1966. The church building is primarily of 15th century construction. There are some 13th century materials which remain, and there are some fancy little lamps on the bridge too over Watton Beck. That bridge into the churchyard is named Church Bridge. The south porch and north vestry are dated 1859. The tower's parapet is 20th century. Aside from those things, I found very little about this one. Having said that, I can tell you that Watton Parish Council's AGM takes place here. Given its style, I wondered if this had one time formed part of Watton Priory. Speaking of the Priory, there's a footpath you can use here to access the field next to it, and from there we can get a look at the building in question. So there's a little field between the two, between the church and the priory, and there's a footpath that runs through it, which is where I'm stood on right now. This will eventually take me back to the A164 via the avenue. This field's interesting. Take a look at it. What do you think these little hills are? I guarantee you those are earthworks. And earthworks they are. The field was the site of some of the priory's monastic buildings. The remaining building is known as Watton Abbey, which was the prior's lodging. Watton Priory was a Gilbertine double monastery founded in 1150 by Eustace Fitzjohn, and it was dissolved in 1539 when Henry VIII did that thing we often speak about. And that brings us to the nun of Watton, who, after an affair with a lay brother, became pregnant while in the priory, but escaped the usual punishments like being burned to death or skinned alive. Instead, the nun was locked in a cell before being forced to castrate her ex-lover. God was then said to intervene, ending her pregnancy and freeing her, events which were recognised as miracles. Okay, I'm battling the sun as much as I'm battling vegetation at the moment. Hopefully I managed to get enough of that. So yeah, that's Watton Priory. It's a very impressive building. Reminds me a bit of Hodsock Priory, but of course remember Hodsock Priory was never a priory. I should make the point here that Wattun Abbey is marked on the maps as Watton Priory, which is, I suppose, correct given the history. I think either term is acceptable, really. Now we're on the avenue, and although this looks just like a rough old footpath, this was once a formal tree-lined avenue that linked the A164 to Watton Priory. It's little more than a footpath now, and ambling down it we pass something small and probably water related again. I've no idea what this was, it just broke up the walk. We're back on the A164, almost where we began. From north to south, Watton is very small, so most traffic that passes never sees what we just have. I find that quite poignant. There's another pinboard of note just over the road. This one seems to be used for current events. You'll note the Ukrainian flag flying alongside it. And if you'd like to come and visit Watton and get a look for yourself at all those earthworks and the abbey and the gorgeous Watton Beck, you'll be needing a bus, the 121 from Hull. And that's pretty much it for the village of Watton, but we're not quite done with the parish because I need to drive now to the west through an area called Cawkeld. Now, I drove through this yesterday on the way to my hotel. It's a very narrow road, there aren't any passing places, so I'm hoping and praying that I don't meet any traffic as I drive down towards the start of my next one. Before I do that, you guys need a picture bit, and that's coming right now. So to finish, we're taking a drive through an area known as Cawkeld, which as far as I can tell is the name for a farm more than anything else. However, this area has quite an interesting slice or two of history. For starters, if you whack Cawkeld into any half-decent internet search engine, you'll likely be led to something about Cawkeld sinks. The Cawkeld Sinks plantation is a boggy, wooded area and there's a path through it which forms part of the Minster Way. It surrounds a small lake, but that's not what it used to be. You see, we're still on the Yorkshire Wolds, even if Watton Village didn't really feel like it. The Wolds are primarily chalk hills, and all over this part of Yorkshire there were chalk pits. That's exactly what Cawkeld Sinks was, but it's also got a link to Hutton Cranswick because the former chalk pit houses the remains of a World War II air raid shelter for Hutton Cranswick Airfield. According to Historic England, there's also an associated bomb dump. I would imagine it's not going to have any unexploded material, but after learning that, I'm glad I stayed in the car. That said, people do walk through here. When I drove up into Hutton Cranswick using this road, there were loads of walkers around. This area is littered with footpaths, many more than just the Minster Way. There are more wooded areas too, like for example Wedding Wood, which is on the right just before this drive ends. Apparently, that's a good location for bramble picking. I'll let the road do the talking now. Enjoy the rest of the ride towards the next parish. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the parish of Watton here in the East Riding of Yorkshire. Time for me to move on to my next one, and where I'm stood now is actually in the next one. I've come across the parish boundary and I'm outside this. That is LKAB Minerals, and that's where I'll be starting next week's episode. But for now, this has been the parish of Watton, and I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.